All right, so let's talk about this big rematch between Oleksandr Usyk and Daniel Dubois. And I've had Daniel Dubois in this fight since this fight was announced. As soon as I heard this fight was announced, my ears perked up because I was like, Daniel's got a good chance to win this one. Daniel Dubois could very well be the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world after this fight, and I'm very happy about that. I thought that the moment that Anthony Joshua's head hit the canvas at Wembley Stadium last September, that Daniel Dubois was the best heavyweight in the world. The moment that he knocked out Anthony Joshua, he became the best heavyweight in the world. I remember watching Usyk versus Fury 2, or Fury versus Usyk 2, whichever it was, and just thinking to myself, these aren't the two best heavyweights in the world. The best heavyweight in the world is sitting in the front row, and his name is Daniel Dubois. The only thing holding me back from thinking that Daniel Dubois is going to hand Alexander Usyk his first career loss is the fact that Usyk is the smaller fighter and he can outbox Dubois from range. It's very hard to bet against any fighter who that is true about in any fight. If you're the smaller fighter and you can box better from the outside, it's very hard to pick against that fighter, just in general. But Dubois is a physical presence, and he's in his prime. He bullied Anthony Joshua. Anthony Joshua is a huge heavyweight, and he was able to physically impose himself in that ring. And Turki al-Sheikh with these smaller rings, it's less room to move for Usyk as well. Usyk needs to move, he needs to box, and so many people have speculated and speculated and speculated on Usyk aging and Usyk getting older for this fight and him showing signs of age in this fight. And the truth is, there is no sterling proof that we have. There's no actual smoking gun of evidence that anybody that thinks that can use to say, look, Alexander Usyk is old, because he looks just as good as he ever has. He truly is a master boxer, right? He hones his craft, he focuses on his craft, and all respect in the world to him. His focus of his career from the beginning, similar to Muhammad Ali, the greatest, has been greatness. Alexander Usyk is focused on greatness solely and focused on legacy, and you can tell by the fact that he fights absolutely everyone. You can tell by the fact that he's fighting Daniel Dubois right now, because Daniel Dubois right now is a force to be reckoned with. And you definitely have at least some evidence from the Joshua fight that he's patched up the holes in his game that needed to be patched up after his first loss to Usyk. And if this is any kind of a different Usyk at all, it's going to be a completely different fight. I think that Dubois is going to actually be able to initiate against Usyk in this fight in a way that he wasn't in the first fight. I think that the early rounds are going to be a lot more trouble for Usyk than he bargained for. I think if Usyk game planned and trained for the late rounds, he's going to regret it because he really might get knocked down and knocked out here early in the fight by a very determined Daniel Dubois. This fight means a lot more to Daniel Dubois than it does to Alexander Usyk. This is a chance for Daniel Dubois to become an undisputed heavyweight champion in his prime. This is a chance for him to start a legacy. This is a chance for him to knock off a legend, to set something right that he thought was wrong 2 years ago with that low blow, which I'm not going to comment on in this video. All I'll say is that we have seen Dubois damage Usyk in the past, and that's something we can't say about every fighter. Doubly, Usyk has shown throughout his career to be vulnerable to the body. And I'll be humble enough to admit that my pick is a little bit influenced by this, right? You gotta pick against Usyk eventually. There has to be that fight on this incredible run that he's been on over the past years, moving up from cruiserweight to heavyweight and beating all comers, not once fighting in his home country, not once fighting in front of a true home crowd. The closest he's ever gotten is Poland in his last fight. Or I believe that was the first Dubois fight, actually. My apologies. Was when he fought in Poland. That's the closest he's ever come to having a true home fight, and he's won every single one of them. But there has to be that fight. There has to be that circumstance eventually where Usyk comes up short. And, Usyk has been the heavyweight champion of the world for a while, and sure, he's not a big celebrity, he's not out there partying, he's still very much a boxer, he's still very much an artist in that way, and a dedicated student of his craft. But being the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world is still being the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And there's lots of credit to be given for not falling into the vices of champions of the past, for sure. But that's not Usyk's personality anyway. There are other smaller drawbacks, mental drawbacks, to having achieved a goal like that, to having achieved a definite legendary status in boxing at this point, especially for someone who seems to be as aware of their own position in the scope of the heavyweight, in the scope of the landscape of heavyweight legends as Alexander Usyk is. There is a risk here inherently. And when you combine that with his body just naturally aging up to the age of 39 where he is now, or rather 38, he's 38 now. The part of it I'm worried about is actually not the later rounds. I think that Usyk probably still has the same amount of stamina, if not more, probably more than Dubois. He definitely had more before. He probably still has slightly more now. The part of the fight that I'm worried about for Usyk is actually the early rounds. It's if Dubois has a strong early start. If Dubois starts strong behind the jab, Usyk is in a lot of trouble. Usyk's in a lot of trouble. If Dubois actually comes out jabbing better and outstrikes Usyk in the first round and just, gets down his throat with aggressive straights, jabs, and works the body. Dubois, he doesn't have the most technical striking, but he has aggression, he has poise, he has maturity, he sticks right to the game plan. He's a very professional fighter. And there's questions about his mental toughness, but there aren't any questions about his mental focus, actually. He's essentially let himself be stopped in a couple of fights, of course, in boxing to accusations of quitting. He's never actually quit in a fight before. But he has stopped himself when he's felt he's taken too much punishment to persevere his career, which, again, I think just speaks to the intelligence of the man. I think he's a very smart fighter. He just has limitations as a pure boxer that Usyk doesn't have. But when you bring the physical strength into the equation, when you bring the age gap into the equation, when you bring the fact that Dubois has been continuously improving and looks to be an absolute force to be reckoned with right now, it's hard for me not to take Dubois by a knockout, actually, in this fight. Now, we've never seen Usyk get knocked out, and he's an incredible defensive boxer. He has to be where he is. But there's something about a prime, determined Daniel Dubois against, an older, aging heavyweight champion who has come up from cruiserweight and has fought so many fights at heavyweight. So many. He just has to have so much mileage on him at this point, especially compared to a young fighter like Dubois and someone with a much larger physical frame like Dubois. I think Dubois is such a special fighter at this point in time. I actually think that this fight would have been better served being marketed around him with the A side. I think a big part of the problem with why this fight hasn't generated quite the clicks that it has, quite the stir that you would expect from a traditional heavyweight title fight, is that Dubois is actually the far more imposing, far more intimidating, and far more promising fighter out of these two at this point, and he isn't being marketed at the A side, as the A side. So my prediction for this biggest heavyweight fight of the year is going to be Daniel Dubois by a 4th round knockout. That's right, round 4. It could happen in any of the first 4 rounds, but I'm saying early, bro. I'm saying early. I'm saying that Dubois is going to get in there, and Usyk is going to be facing a challenge very quickly in this fight that he hasn't ever before in his professional career, because he's just going to be that one little tick slower. You don't need to be that much slower. You just got to be that one little tick slower. I hope that Usyk goes out there and outboxes Dubois and proves me wrong and is just sticking the jab at range and getting in and getting out real fast, and Dubois is just hacking and missing and he's ducking underneath the big hooks, but I'm sorry, I just don't think that's going to happen. I think that Usyk's going to find himself back against the ropes. I think Dubois is going to get big body shots on him up against the ropes. I think he's going to hit him. I think he's going to hit him when he tries to get in. I think he's going to have a better chance to hit him when he tries to get out. Because against a bigger fighter, as the smaller fighter, you are, of course, the one who is forced to initiate, right? Just like against Fury with Usyk. Usyk did an incredible job against Fury, especially in the second fight, getting in and out of range, getting his combinations in, and exiting the pocket before Fury could get back at him. And I'm sorry, but that is such a more dangerous proposition against a power puncher like Daniel Dubois. There's no way that Usyk gets hit with the same kind of shot that Joshua did. Usyk would not make the same kind of over-aggressive mistake that Joshua did to get knocked out. But all Usyk is going to have to do against this dialed-in, motivated, focused, in his prime Daniel Dubois is make one tiny little mistake. And even then, if Dubois decides to push down on the gas pedal too hard and just go full on for the knockout, there might not be anything that Alexander Usyk can do. Dubois isn't that kind of relentless, in-your-face pressure fighter like Mike Tyson, but he's very, very, very comfortable marching forward for someone who, basically because he's as massive as he is. He knows that he can impose himself with his own physical frame in the ring against Usyk, and Usyk is just going to have to contend with that. It's a very different kind of challenge than Tyson Fury, and it's a very different kind of challenge than Anthony Joshua, who, might I add, Alexander Usyk loved fighting Fury and loved fighting Joshua because neither of those fighters are especially talented body punchers for a heavyweight, right? It's a big part of why people see a young heavyweight like Ajit Kabayel and think that he's so qualified to beat Usyk because his strength is his body work. Well, Daniel Dubois also is a very good body puncher, and it just so happened that in their first match, one of them landed a little low. I don't think that the body shot is going to be the one that gets the knockout, but I think there's going to be a really big body shot that damages and hurts Usyk and sets up Dubois to basically just mash through his guard and maybe get a TKO or knock him down, get a KO. And I'm not trying to make it sound like Usyk is gonna get beat up or ragdolled or brutalized, but that is kind of what I'm predicting. No, I don't want to see it as much as the next guy. I don't want to see it. I want Usyk to retire undefeated. I want Usyk to retire on top. I want this fight to be a war. But even if Usyk manages to survive the first few rounds of Dubois pressuring him and being the bigger man and being the stronger fighter and initiating the action in the fight, and again, especially if he wins the battle of the jabs early on, Dubois, Usyk is in a lot of trouble. If Usyk manages to get out of the first 4 or 5 rounds of a fight like that, especially if Dubois does good work to the body, I don't actually know that Usyk's career-long, stamina advantage that he seemed to have in almost every fight of his career, I don't know if you're going to see that in the same way. I think you could definitely see Alexander Usyk fade in a way that we haven't seen him fade before in a fight. Now is the perfect time, I think, to say that all of this is, of course, with the caveat of Daniel Dubois having a great training camp and continuing to improve. And if there's some kind of, if something comes out about Dubois having a bad camp or Dubois not training hard enough or just something going wrong with Daniel Dubois, then it won't surprise me if he loses. But for right now, with the progress that Daniel Dubois seems to have being made as a fighter, with the momentum that seems to be behind Daniel Dubois and how talented of a fighter he is, how powerful of a puncher he is, I think he's going to claim his rightful place as the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world. And we're going to enter a new era of the heavyweight division this Saturday, July 19th at Wembley Stadium. So that's my prediction. Let me know what you guys think. Let me know if you guys have a different pick for this fight. I'm sure a lot of you do. It was really hard for me to not pick Usyk in this one. And we're going to have our Pacquiao versus Barrios prediction soon. I'll have a prediction up for UFC 318. I think I might just do the main event on that one because the card is just completely empty after Holloway versus Poirier. Like, Paulo Costa is the co-main. But there's going to be a lot more fight content. I'm going to get back to making new Boxing Manager episodes and everything for you guys. I'm loving the way the channel's been progressing and the way everything's been going. I'm having a blast making content. So keep an eye out for the upcoming videos. Throw a like, throw a subscribe on the video if you guys like boxing content like this, and I'll see you on the next one.